Yeah. All right, we're on. I'm ready to get started here on harassment and discrimination.
Hey, Kathy,
Yeah.
Honey, before you do that, can you get me a coffee? I
Tom,
don't need any sugar in it because you're so sweet.
that's not really in my job description, Tom.
Yeah, but you know that you gotta get along in this department.
So that's funny, but I'm just going to give you a little history about me before I came to Gray, and don't worry, it's not going to be super personal or anything like that, but I worked for 10 years on the Office of Violence Against Women grant program, which involved domestic violence, stalking, sexual assault, and bullying, basically. And I worked on that program for almost 10 years. I kind of fell into it. It wasn't something that I picked personally. It kind of picked me because my background was in research and I needed a job. I wanted to go back to school. So I landed at USM working on that grant program. I actually started in children, childcare, Maine Roads to Quality, and ended up at, you kind of maneuvered wherever you could keep a job is how it worked at USM. So I ended up on that grant program and I learned a lot. And I can imagine that there's many of you in the room that are from my generations, which was born in the 60s, particularly women. If you started working, the world is a changing world. And you had men and women working together in environments that weren't typical. My first job, I just wanted to give you a little, and you can change the slide, Grant. First of all, I'm just going to say that, you know, we're trying to all have a nice workplace is what we're trying to do, where everybody treats each other with respect. And you can change it again, please. So I just want to tell you, it was an eye-opener to me working with a group of people that actually were on that grant program because they wanted to be on that grant program, and most of them had a history or a background that drove them to work on that grant program. And I learned quickly that things that happened perhaps to me in a workplace that I just kind of brushed off, for other people, it was a trigger, and it really upset them. So I had to learn how to behave in a situation where there was men and women that had suffered some kind of violence or harassment or discrimination of whatever nature. So I just wanted to put that up there, so that's why I was chosen to do this, because I do have a background. My background was qualitative and quantitative research. That meant that I actually read victim stories for my job. So it kind of was an eye-opener, and the first eye-opening experience I had on that job was when my boss told me that she had been married and her husband made her shoplift for them in order to eat. And she would shoplift, and she came home with hamburger, and he beat her to a pulp because he wanted steak. So that was kind of my first eye-opener, that when I say something about my husband or, you know, nice about my family or my husband, sometimes it set people off, you know, and I'm like, what is that? Where is this coming from? Because their experience with their partner or whoever it is was different than mine, or their experience in their family was different than my experience. So I just kind of wanted to start that off. So there's generational things where one generation and the workplace was one way, then there's kind of that middle one that we're at right now, my age group, where we've experienced kind of both sides, and then the young generation has received more training. They're in a different situation than perhaps we experienced. So go ahead and change the slide, Grant. So as part of this training, I think that you probably should go look at these links. That's our policy, so you're aware of the policy. It lays out what you should do in case you are experiencing any of these issues. Next slide. That's, once again, questions and answers. If you have any questions at the end, feel free to ask me. So, like I said, I like a little humor. Waitress. How many women, men have waitressed or done tables at some point in their life? How many people had harassment in your workplace when you were waiting tables? A story I have, I was 16 years old, first job, Hungry Farmer restaurant. Very equivalent to a restaurant that we have in this town. And I hear a waitress laughing. I was waiting tables and waitressing. It was near closing. I'm walking by a table, and I see a $100 bill sitting on the edge of the table. And I'm like, what in the world is that? So I said, hi, sir, how you doing? I'm just going to clean, it's getting close to closing. And he says, this is for you. And I said, I can't take the $100. I said, I wasn't your waitress. I'm just cleaning the tables. He says, no, this is for you, sweetheart. And I said, oh, sir, we're closing, blah, 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 blah. And I kept moving, kept on going. He didn't leave. So I went to my supervisor. And to be quite honest, my supervisor was a man, and he was going through kind of a midlife thing, so he flirted with all of us waitresses too. But I realize now, looking back, that that was a generational thing with him. It was just the way he behaved. But he turned into a real hero because he went and asked that man to leave. Not only did he ask him to leave, he escorted him out of the restaurant, and then he walked me to my car. But it didn't end there, because apparently he'd been waiting in his car, and he followed me all the way home. And I was driving to my house. This guy's in my rearview mirror. I could see it. I get home. My parents aren't home, and I know it. We had a garage. I put the garage door opener up, but our garage didn't enter into the house from the garage. It was a split entry, and there was no door into the house. So I pulled my car in and parked in the garage and sat there for 20 minutes and waited. And then I decided, well, I can't sit here forever. No cell phones, remember? No cell phones or any of that. So I walked through the back door into the backyard and broke into my sliding glass door with my student ID, and broke into my house and went, and then looked out the window to see if he was still there. So these kind of things happen to people all the time, where you have someone stalking you, bullying you, or harassing you. Another story, my daughter waitressed at a local restaurant. She was 16, working the counter, and someone not her age put in the fry basket when she was cleaning off the table their phone number and call me for a good time. 16 years old, She had a mom and dad that told her how to handle those types of situations. Not everybody has that. Next slide. These are the list of the protected classes, just so you know. That list is always changing, but it hasn't changed in a while. So you just need to be aware of the different classes, the federal classifications of protected classes. Next slide, please. Workplace, there's a definition for workplace harassment. Here's some examples on this slide. I don't want to just read it to you, but back one, thanks. I think you guys are familiar with this. I think all of you know better, but I just want to just put the definitions there and give you some examples. Untrue malicious gossip, that's harassment. Trying to get someone fired by being manipulative. Comments about race or any of the other protected classes, those are all included. Bullying, so I had 30 slides, and Deb had me actually add this part of it, because this is a very real thing, and you think of bullying in high school, middle school. Most of you that are my age class probably experienced some sort of initiation, those kind of good things, but it isn't appropriate, and particularly, not appropriate in the workplace. So there's the definitions of the types, and once again, the world has changed. Cyberbullying is where it's at now, because it's quiet, you can't be seen as easily, and so it kind of flies under the cover. So everything looks fine at the surface at work, but underneath there's something going on inside or outside of the workplace. That's a good picture. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Repeated, undeserved, unreasonable behavior towards a person or a group of persons in the workplace. So she asked me to add the section on cyberbullying as well. Computers, cell phones, other electronic devices, instant messaging. These are the terminology for cyberbullying, and honestly, I did not know what some of those are. Clueless. And if you'll go to the next slide, Grant, I got a little factoid. 95% of parents cannot identify common chat room language. And that's totally true. So the two that I didn't know, I added up there, had no idea what flaming was. They use profanity, they use all kinds of things in order to make someone so uncomfortable, and it can lead to serious consequences. Impersonation is when someone gets on your Facebook account, pretends like they're you. And that's apparently happening all the time. And then they put stuff out there that doesn't look good for you. Next slide, please. Facebook. I know we have a policy for how we use our internet and how we use our website and how we use our town Facebook, but it's very important to know that you are opening yourself up to stalking and cyber stalking when you have a Facebook account. People use it to do all kinds of horrible things, so you just need to be able to be careful and make sure that you don't say anything about your job, your coworkers, or anybody that you wouldn't want someone else to see. Next slide, please. So sexual harassment, unwelcome, unwanted, or offensive sexual advances, requests for favors or other verbal and physical conduct of a sexual nature. So it can be verbal, physical, written, or visual. I put a slide in there. It is not just a male towards female thing. It happens all the time. I read the data. The difference is it was not reported before. Now men are reporting the same type of behavior that people think of as men towards women. And it happens all the time. I read a lot of grantees' information with particular stories. A lot of times, it's usually there's a power difference, boss or new person. Someone was telling me the other day that they were an intern at a college and they were treated horribly because they were the intern and they were able to have that power and control type of situation. Next slide. A couple definitions of types of sexual harassment, quid pro quo, and that's where your job is actually on the line, where you feel like there's a suggestion there that if I don't do this, I could be jeopardizing my employment or a raise or a promotion. Hostile work environment is when someone makes you so uncomfortable that you can't even perform your job. Next slide. Here's some examples of harassment. Can be as benign as, being asked to attend a party and making it feel like if you're not there that you've done, you're not doing what you should be doing, or it can be very forward. Discrimination, new category. This is when you are discriminated on, based on one of those protected classes. It could be a disability, it could be race, it could be anything. It could be a learning disability, but you're able to perform the job and you're not getting the promotion or you're not getting the raise or whatever it is that you should be getting because of that protected class. And here's some examples. You've got a job that's up, you got a well-qualified candidate, she's pregnant, you say, not gonna do that, they're gonna be on maternity leave, or the age, you think, oh, well, they're not going to be here very long. I don't want to do that. There's all kinds of examples of discrimination. I'm sure you guys can think of lots of them. Here's an example. Any employee believing that they have been subjected to workplace harassment, you need to make a complaint. Don't let it go. And on our policy, basically, it goes to the department, your department head or supervisor. If your department head or supervisor is the person that's harassing you or discriminating against you, then you need to go to the town manager. Next slide. So we have a couple questions, and I know we didn't have a lot of time, so I'm just answering for you on these ones. Sure.
Now, so if the town manager is harassing you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
As long as you just address that one.
If the town manager is harassing, you go to your manager or someone in your department, and they will involve the proper chain of command of getting someone else involved. And at the end, we'll discuss that a little bit more, and we'll talk about confidentiality and that type of stuff as well. But these are the reasons why people don't tell. And a big one, I know for people in my generation anyway, is you just don't want to say anything. I just don't want to make a big deal about something. Just let it go. Being embarrassed, not being believed. If it's very subtle, then you think, well, maybe they're not going to believe me if I tell them that, and they just think I'm being a pain, and I'm just causing a ruckus, and I need to just be able to get over it. What can a department head do to help employees feel safe reporting harassment? There's the set an example. That's the biggest one. Shut something down. If you see something, you think it's funny, it may not be funny for someone, and you have to kind of think. I watch a lot of World War II movies. My husband, it drives him nuts. I love history. I love World War II. I love all of that stuff. And I watched a movie on a true story, and there was two soldiers, and they had taken over a town in France, and almost all the men were gone because they were fighting in the French resistance. And one of the soldiers was like, "Oh, look at all these women that don't have anybody there, you know?" And the other one said, "That could be my sister or your daughter or your mother." And so when you deal with people in a workplace, you should always kind of think, hey, would I want someone to say that to my daughter, or would I want someone to say that to my sister or someone in my family member, and kind of take it, we're kind of a family here. We're stuck with each other for 40 plus hours a week. So we just kind of need to think, maybe I shouldn't say that. Kind of take a step back and say, and here's another thing too, the workplace. My husband works at Poland Springs water bottling. He's third shift. It's all men. So you're there and you're in a different environment, and it's hard to move from one environment to another environment. And so you just kind of have to think about where you're at and think that you may not have I had a great childhood. My parents were there, mom and dad protected me. Don't have any huge stories other than the guy trying to leave me a $100 bill, but things like that. But great childhood. Not everybody has your story. They might have had a different situation where something traumatic has happened to them, and it is a trigger to them. So something that someone else might think is funny may not be funny to another person. Next slide, please. So here's the complaint process. Complaints are taken seriously. They're confidential to the extent possible. It is possible that someone may need to be brought in to be asked, but it's not going to be spread just for whatever reason. It would only be if it was needed. And employees are expected to cooperate with the questions that are being asked of them. How should an employer treat an employee accused of workplace harassment, sexual harassment, or discrimination? And you guys can just think about it because of time. Next slide. Here's your answer. So an employee that's accused of sexual harassment should be treated with professionalism and respect. And just because they've been accused doesn't mean it's true. And the accused employee will have the opportunity to defend themselves and present the information from their point of view. The town will conduct an investigation, and conclusions will not be reached until it's complete. An employee who harasses another employee because of their protected class or another employee from the workplace. Oh, this is always a good one. What happens when you have a work party or you're outside of these walls or your walls or wherever you work, the library? It's still not appropriate to be outside of these walls and treat a coworker like that. The other issue is sometimes it's not your coworker, it's a customer or someone that comes in on a regular basis. If it's something that's repeated and it's offensive, it may need to be dealt with. And that's kind of a personal decision when you really think about it. I mean, if it's making you uncomfortable, then it needs to be dealt with. If a supervisor or department head sees it, it needs to be dealt with. Next slide, please. So this is exactly what I was talking about. If it's a contractor, copier guy, whoever it is, someone that comes in and repairs something, and it's repeated and it's becoming a problem, it's not funny, and it's definitely bothering you, or you can tell it's bothering someone else that you work with, it needs to be dealt with. Retaliation, no retaliation against someone that reports. It's that simple. Next. So here's some scenarios. An employee reports harassment to his or her supervisor. Department head says, "I don't want you to do anything about this." What do you think is going to happen? A supervisor cannot just listen. Once it's been reported, the supervisor has to do an investigation. They're obligated to it. And in fact, you have the responsibility to address the situation. Next. Scenario 2, an employee filed the report of harassment with their supervisor. After an investigation, the company did not agree that harassment occurred. Because harassment was not found, the employee worries that she will be disciplined. Are the employee's worries founded? Nope. The answer is no. Sometimes an investigation will conclude that the behavior was not harassment or discrimination, but it was inappropriate. So there may be disciplinary action, but it may not be classified as harassment. A technician is contracted to maintain the office copy machine. Each time the technician makes a service call, he tells an inappropriate joke. Some employees seem to respond, laugh, and encourage him. Even though no employees have complained, what is the department head's responsibility? Next. They have the obligation to maintain the integrity of the office environment. The department head should direct the employees back to work. Even though the technician is not an employee, the department head should tell the technician to stop telling inappropriate jokes. And the department head should just let the town manager know, and depending on the severity of the situation, they may actually contact that company. Scenario 4, an investigation resulted in an employee being disciplined for sexual harassment. The disciplined employee was mad and encouraged others to shun those who participated in the investigation. You have been asked to refuse to speak to your coworkers who reported the employee's behavior to the department head. I think this one is obvious. Most of this came from training from college campuses. It's a huge issue on college campuses. Next slide. So retaliation is prohibited. So wrap up, what have you learned? Workplace harassment, sexual harassment, and discrimination can be illegal behavior. True or false? Go ahead and speak out this time.
True.
True. Next. Absolutely true. Next one, next question. Oh, I think you went. Oh, there you're right, sorry, go back. Only a member of management has the power to eliminate discrimination, workplace harassment, and sexual harassment in the workplace. False? If employees at every level have the power to prevent and eliminate discrimination, workplace harassment and sexual harassment by being a role model, not engaging in it, and being comfortable enough to tell each other respectfully when they have been offended. And I think that's a key. Not every incident needs to be blown up into a full-blown investigation. If you feel threatened or harassed in a way that you're really uncomfortable with, yes, but if you think it's something that you can say directly to the person, you know what, I didn't find that funny, or I'm offended by that, then try that method. It's kind of like in code enforcement, when someone comes in and files a complaint, you don't want your first contact to be the code enforcement officer. Go talk to your neighbor and see if you can resolve it. Same thing with this. If it's something that you're so uncomfortable with, though, then report it. If I tell my department head and or town manager that I'm being harassed, she can guarantee my name will be kept out of it. I think you all know the answer to that. It's false, correct. Next slide. So they have an obligation to to file that report, and they'll try to keep it confidential as possible. They may need to have some information from some employees, though, that were involved or witnessed it. Next. Prevention is the most effective way to eliminate discrimination, workplace harassment, and sexual harassment in the workplace. Next.
True.
True. That's right. Educating the workforce, that's what we're doing today. It's a touchy topic. Honestly, before I worked at USM, it was certainly not something I would have wanted to talk about. As part of my job, I had to, well, actually, I wanted to get a scholarship because I went back to school. And as part of the scholarship, I needed to volunteer. So the obvious choice was Student Conduct Committee. I was maybe 38, 39 when I started working there. I'm on the Student Conduct Committee, and I'm shocked. I mean, I'm shocked. I've been married for how many years? It was an education, let's put it that way. There were things that I had never heard before. So there's nothing new under the sun, but there are crazy things going on out there, and you just need to be aware that there's people that may have experienced some crazy things. And so you just need to be very ultra sensitive to what other people's experiences might have been. What can you do? And I have this slideshow available too if anybody wants to use it for anything. Avoid race-based, culturally offensive humor. Refuse to participate or condone discrimination. Be professional in conduct. You can read all these. Be proactive. Cut it off at the core. Don't cut it off before it gets out of hand. And once again, if you experience it or witness it, contact your supervisor, department head. So these are just some things that I gleaned from college campus training and workplace training and state training. These are things that you might want to think about. Ruffling feathers. If you can tell that someone's a little uncomfortable, maybe just go and apologize and say, hey, that was that's not who I am, that was out of character, I wouldn't necessarily, say that all the time, and I'm sorry, And then once again, the whole goal is that we want to be happy, content, and be able to work together on a daily basis, 40, 60 hours a week sometime. Just treat people like you would in your own family or someone that you cared about. And that's all I have. I know it's a heavy topic. Like I said, before working on that grant program, I had the attitude, hey, just get over it. What's your problem? I didn't understand where other people were coming from. So that's all I have. If there's any questions or anything, but just make sure you report something that's making you really uncomfortable. And that's all I have. Is it a raffle time? Who's drawn? Can you see it?
Number 395574, 395574. Be mine.